Those were attached and sent out. I've got a few
gosh.
minor changes I'll send to you.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else have anything?
No.
No.
All right, can I get a motion and a second?
So
Why not?
moved.
You got a motion
Yeah.
from Jane and a second.
Second. Yeah, yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
All of us, yeah.
All right, we'll move on to citizens' comments. Any member of the public care to speak? There is no one here, so no citizens' comments. All right, so we'll move right on to, we've got a presentation today. Abby Sterling is joining us. She's with Manomet, and I'll let her take over, and she's gonna give you some information on the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network.
All right, thank you all so much for the opportunity to join you this afternoon. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Great.
Yes, very well.
Good. So I prepared some slides to share with you some information about Wizern. So I'm gonna, if it's possible to have screen sharing, I can share my screen and share those slides. The host just has to allow me to do such.
We're working on it. 1 second.
All right. Perfect. All right. Hopefully this will work. Lately, Zoom has been kicking me off when I screen share, so if I happen to disappear, I will pop back as soon as possible. But I'm very excited to talk to you all this afternoon about considering Kiowa Island as a potential member of a new Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network site that we're thinking about for South Carolina. I wanted to just talk quickly about who I am and what I do and what Manomet is to give you a little context, and then explain a little bit of background about what the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network is and how it would look for Kiowa to be part of it and what kind of awesome benefits would exist for being part of that network. So my name's Abby Sterling. I work for Manomet. Manomet is a nonprofit that focuses on coastal conservation issues. We deal a lot with thinking about shorebird conservation. We have staff across the whole hemisphere from Maine down to Argentina. And I am based locally in Georgia. So I'm the director of Manomet's Georgia Bight Shorebird Conservation Initiative. And this program was launched in 2018 in recognition for how important our little corner of the world is for shorebirds. My scope of focus is Northeast Florida from kind of the St. Johns River through the Georgia coast and South Carolina coast. So I get to work with a lot of the different partners, federal partners, state partners, communities that are working on shorebird conservation and trying to bring together all of the work that we're doing to increase capacity and sort of in recognition of the fact that shorebirds are using this whole geography broadly together. So we really need to coordinate in order to create as many opportunities for shorebird conservation as we can in this region. So that's sort of the basis for what I do. Shorebirds are one of the most critically declining groups of birds. I'm sure you all, heard about that 3 billion birds paper that Partners published several years ago that looked at broad population declines. Shorebirds were one of the groups that were declining really quickly, and we see as much as a 70% decline for many shorebirds. The chart that you can see here with this big red box shows that many species are declining, particularly the long-distance migrants. And so when we're thinking about shorebird conservation, we really operate on this flyway scale. We're part of the Atlantic Flyway, which is the pink swath here. And so the birds that we're thinking about protecting, the habitats that we're focusing on, are supporting birds that travel really the whole length of the hemisphere here, from Argentina all the way up to the Arctic. We know that shorebirds particularly pose some challenges when we think about how to protect them, because they have very high site fidelity. So when we are thinking about these migrating shorebirds that nest up in the Arctic, very often when they come through, they stop at the same spot year after year, because they know they've got good places to feed and rest in those places. So very high site fidelity, and that means that every little patch along this tremendous journey is important for these birds. They cross huge geographic areas, so we really need to have broad collaboration and communication to protect shorebirds. And just by their very nature, thinking about this like interface between wet and dry, shorebirds depend on a very narrow type of habitat, coastal areas often. And many of these coastal areas are at high risk for loss of habitat because of things like development, climate change, contamination, and disturbance. So that's kind of setting the stage for why we use the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network as a really important tool in shorebird conservation. The Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network, the acronym we always say is WISRN, which sounds a little bit weird, but is easier than the whole mouthful of Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network. It's a network of sites, basically. And so we have sites across the hemisphere that are linked together. It is a non-regulatory designation that helps highlight the important sites that shorebirds need. And really the way that we think about WISRN is that it's an important conservation tool. So WISRN kind of falls broadly under the conservation programs that we have at Manomet, but there is a hemispheric council and there's a United States committee that reviews all of the data about each site to help decide if a site is indeed worthy of inclusion, and they help communicate and work the process of nomination and acceptance of sites. So that's kind of where WISRN lives, is housed broadly within Manomet, but it's also sort of its own program as well, with members from the shorebird conservation community as part of these councils and committees that help make decisions about which sites get included in WISRN. So again, non-regulatory, that's one of the really important things. It is just sort of a great way to acknowledge the importance of a place and highlight the commitment of partners to protecting those places for shorebirds. There's over 110, I think we're up to 112 sites now that are part of the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network. And in total, that means there's 38.6 million acres of shorebird habitat protected through this non-regulatory designation process. And sites are designated based on the numbers of birds that they host. So you could have, a site of regional importance or a site of international importance or a site of hemispheric importance, just based on the numbers of birds that your site hosts. Within the Georgia Bight, this focus that we're kind of part of, the Georgia Bight here, we have 3 WISRN sites. There's the Altamaha River Delta, the Georgia Barrier Islands, landscape of hemispheric importance, and then the Cape Romaine Santee Delta region. And I just wanted to touch briefly on each of those sites so you could kind of get a little bit of a sense of sort of what other places that have been part of the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network look like in our region. The first one that was designated in 1999 was the Altamaha River Delta. It's a really small site. You can see on the map here, it's these yellow polygons, Little St. Simons Island, Wolf Island, and some of the other islands at the mouth of the Altamaha where it flows out to the Atlantic. This was designated as a regional site. It's about 20,000 acres, and it supports about 20,000 shorebirds every single year, including large percentages of American oyster catchers, red knots, sunland, and piping plovers. And then in 2017, the Georgia Barrier Islands were designated as a landscape of hemispheric importance as the 100th WISRN site. And so that within that designation, there's about 80,000 acres that are supporting about 300,000 shorebirds annually. There's about 8 site owners and site partners in that designation, all committing to protect shorebirds within these sites. And then the last WISRN site is in South Carolina, and that's the Cape Romaine Santee Delta region. This site is managed by South Carolina DNR, and it is a site of international importance. But there are partners besides South Carolina DNR that are also included, including Dewey's Island. It's about a huge site. It's about 200,000 acres, supporting really significant numbers of oyster catchers, dowitchers, and about 100,000 shorebirds every single year. And so with that in mind, that's, I think, really setting the stage for helping highlight just how important Kiowa Island is. So the idea has been proposed to consider creating a WISRN site around the Kiowa Island, Seabrook Island, DeVoe Bank complex. Right now, South Carolina DNR is about to, they've submitted for nomination for DeVoe, which is right down here. I'm sure you all know where DeVoe is. Based on the importance of DeVoe for Whimbrel, with the really exciting news about the gigantic Whimbrel roost that happens there every single spring, as well as supporting really significant numbers of knots and other shorebirds. But we know that birds are broadly using this landscape, so it's not just DeVoe. We've got red knots that are bouncing from DeVoe Bank to Seabrook and Kiowa, hopping back and forth on either side of Captain Sam's Inlet. And so there's been a lot of really great research that's demonstrated just how important these three places are for particularly the threatened Rufa red knot subspecies. So with research that's been carried out by Nathan Center, Felicia Sanders, Janet Tebow, and graduate students, there's been, I'm sure you all are very excited and know about the papers that have come out that highlight just how important this area is for these long distance migrating red knots. The analysis showed that about 41% of the total Rufa population was stopping through and using Kiowa and Seabrook Islands. And not only that, but they're coming and finding enough fuel on Kiowa and Seabrook to completely bypass going to Delaware Bay when they're going up to the Arctic. They're leaving from the southeast and zipping all the way up to the Arctic to nest. So that, even just understanding that little piece of the puzzle, really helps to highlight how important Kiowa Island is to these red knots. And this paper is peer-reviewed, wonderful data that justifies the inclusion of Kiowa Island in the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network. Being part of the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network, again, I've said it's non-regulatory, and so we kind of say there's not really teeth to WISRN, but it's a really wonderful thing because it helps to highlight the site's importance for shorebirds, and it helps encourage decision makers to consider shorebirds in planning. Being part of the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network just is sort of a feather in the cap to say, the folks at this site care about shorebirds and they're going to prioritize shorebird conservation. Not to the exclusion of everything else, it just says that shorebirds are a conservation priority, which I think, looking at all the material and knowing all the awesome work that's gone on in Kiowa is absolutely true of what's going on Kiowa Island. The other thing that happens is there's access to site support from the WISRN Executive Office and opportunities to learn from other sites. So when there's things going on the beach, whether it's thinking about recreational beach use, even some of the projects that go on with habitat modification, learning from other people is one of the best benefits of being part of the WISRN network. It can also be used to justify any kind of funding opportunities, but I think one of the great things is that it sort of becomes a piece of creating community pride, and so it really does raise awareness and foster some positive behavior changes for the public. There's also a lot of great resources, tons of information about shorebird festivals, kids activities, lots of really wonderful things that are collaboratively shared with site partners across the hemisphere. One important thing that I just wanted to highlight is that these sites that are designated in the WISRN network are not necessarily always pristine places. And so I know, thinking about things like the inlet modification programs and things like that, this is not saying that none of that could happen. It's in fact saying that this is a conservation tool, and many sites that are part of the Wizern network are not necessarily pristine sites. So we've got places where there's active shrimp farming going on, active salt farming going on, and even grazing in pasture lands. So unlike some other designations where you're really picking like the most beautiful, perfect habitats, this is a conservation tool to generate support for shorebird conservation and to learn. And I think to have Kiowa as part of the Wizard Network would really help highlight all the hard work that's gone on the island for shorebird conservation and elevate the profile of what site partners are doing in these three places to support the significant numbers of red knots and other shorebirds. So moving forward, in order to become part of the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network, there's a couple steps. The two main things that have to happen is that the site has to have biological significance, which, as I said earlier, weird. Okay. This has been established. So with the work from Nathan Center's lab, Georgia DNR's Red Knot work, South Carolina DNR, and the work that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has done, you can check that box. Kiowa absolutely has biological significance. There's the connection to DeVoe Bank. And so based on the numbers of just even red knots and whimbrels alone, that puts Kiowa in this category of a site of hemispheric importance, which is really cool. Then the next thing to do is determine responsible entities. One thing that's really great about the Wizard designation process is that you don't necessarily have to include every single landowner. You just have to designate responsible entities who agree in writing through a letter of support to include shorebird conservation as a top priority, engage in management practices that protect, maintain, and enhance shorebird habitat, and then keep in communication with the Wizard Executive Office about site changes and things like that. Usually it takes about 6 months for the process to go from submitting an application to review and acceptance. And so we're just kind of right now at this stage where we're thinking through who these responsible entities would be. We're working with folks on Seabrook Island as well. And once that stage happens, then the next step is kind of thinking through this pretty simple application process. If folks on Kiowa are excited about this idea, we'd work closely with the wildlife team and anybody that's interested, and I can share the application as well. But we're really happy to help streamline the application process and work with everybody to communicate and share information about what's needed and sort of the next steps. And so I told Aaron I would talk for 10 minutes, and I've already talked for 16 minutes. And so I'll wrap it up. But I just wanted to say this Wizard designation is a really exciting thing. It is really just in recognition of all of the hard work that has already gone on, highlighting the values of the conservation community on Kiowa Island, and helps show that, these local sites are really important, but by connecting our communities, we can all really work together to protect shorebirds and shorebird habitat. And so I'll stop sharing my screen now, and if anyone has questions, I'd be glad to take them.
Yeah, Abby, this is Jack Coates. I have a semi-related question.
Yes.
I'm going to be in the Falkland Islands 2 weeks from now. What should I watch for?
Falkland Islands. I've never been there.
Well, that's where most of these red knot, lots of the red knots start from there, don't they? From the Patagonia, from southern tip of South America. So
yeah.
I think that's where the origin of a lot of these birds. So are they there? What should I watch for?
They should be there. Yep. So right now we've got the wintering red knots are down in Argentina, but I'm trying to think right now if I can connect you to some of the shorebird people that we work with, you could end up in a really, I know it's such a vast landscape that you've got to really be in sort of the right place at the right time to see, see everything. But
anyway, I just thought it'd be interesting to know what to look out for. So
yeah, I mean, they're in the kind of those coastal I mean, it's such an incredible place because the tides are massive. So it can be, I think it can be really hard to find them because it is such a tremendous landscape.
Yeah.
But down near Tierra del Fuego, all of those places.
That's where we're going to be.
That's like a dream trip of mine. If you want, please, I can reach out to you with some connections if you want to.
That's good.
If you want any leads on some cool things to look at.
All right, maybe I can send you an email. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Anybody have questions for Abby? No questions, Abby. That was great. I'm sure everyone in this room thinks this is a great idea. And so, we'll work through the process, and it'll have to jump through a few little hurdles here at the town. Just continue to work with Aaron and share the application and all of that, and how you progress with Seabrook, and so I guess ultimately it's kind of this is piggybacking on DNR's existing application, or adding.
So what would happen with this process is DeVoe will go through very quickly and easily because of the great surveys and data and everything like that, and the simple ownership of DNR. And so what will end up happening is then we would modify that designation to include Seabrook and Kiowa because all three places are connected. And so right now with Seabrook, I'm on the agenda to speak before the town council on March 14th and kind of bring the proposal to the larger group. The environmental committee of Seabrook was really excited and they moved it forward. So that's kind of where it stands on Seabrook. But for South Carolina DNR, it was really important for them to get DeVoe designated before spring. And just with the timeline of getting Kiowa and Seabrook, moving all those moving pieces, we just figured it was strategic for DNR to go ahead and move forward with DeVoe first.
Sure. Makes sense.
Yeah. So we'll be sort of riding on their coattails, but we'll come in and it'll be really exciting, hopefully.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, I really appreciate it. I'm so grateful for y'all's time. And maybe what I'll do is I'll just drop my email in the chat here. It's asterling@manomet.org. If anyone has any questions, I'm really happy to chat with anybody. And I'll be in South Carolina at the end of this month and again at the middle of March. So if anybody wants to talk more about this or thinks there's other groups that it would be helpful for me to talk to, I'm happy to do that.
Okay. That sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. I'll sign off so you can get down to business.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Do you need a motion that we?
Probably should. Probably should at least make a motion to recommend to town council that they participate in this designation process. Because ultimately it would have to go to town council.
Okay. Well, I'll make that motion, what you said.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Oh,
All right, we're good. All right, we'll move on to old business. And fittingly, first up is the Shorebird Stewardship Program. So Aaron, I don't know if you want to give a little update on the festival maybe and what the stewards are doing.
Yeah, I don't think there's probably a whole lot of stewarding going on. There might be a little bit. I haven't heard from Betty. If there is anything going on, it's probably piping plovers, maybe down at the ends of the island. It's probably about it. But we are working on a Shorebird festival coming up. It'll be on May 11th and 12th. This is kind of a partnership between the town and the Conservancy and South Carolina Audubon, DNR, Fish and Wildlife Service, and Manomet kind of partnering together to kind of create this festival. And we're calling it the Sea Islands Shorebird Festival because there's going to be things happening both on Kiowa and Seabrook Island. there'll be a bunch of field trips. There'll be evening presentations on both nights. There's going to be on the Friday, the 12th, there's going to be a 5-hour kind of thing here at Town Hall, where we're going to invite a bunch of vendors, meaning conservation organizations, to share their information. We'll probably invite local artists to kind of showcase some of their artwork, and there might be some kid activities. Not that there'll be a whole lot of kids around in May, because I think they're probably still in school. But just we have some different activities around, so I think the Thursday night talk will be on Kiowa, and then the Friday night talk will be on Seabrook. So, and they'll be talking about all kinds of shorebird related things, red knots and whimbrels and oyster catchers and all kinds of different topics.
Sounds good. All right, we'll move on to Grow Native. Just got a few things here, and I'll touch on various things that came out of our annual council retreat, which we had last month, earlier this month. So it was I'm sure probably none of you listened to it or watched it online, but it was a 2-day basically discussion of all pertinent topics for the town in the coming year. So there was a several hour discussion on the environmental side, included everything from the marsh management plan and where do we go next to the Grow Native program, bobcats, deer, all of that was discussed, and a lot of good ideas came out of that. Just a couple on the Grow Native side that I will share. Obviously, we've been talking about the rain garden here, which we're moving forward with, and then ideally tying that into our Grow Native trail, which we're hoping to revitalize. And there was discussion around that, around getting a landscaping plan and getting that trail fixed and back to the way it should be. There was also discussion, obviously a big component of Grow Native is growing native, right? So native plants and how we can encourage native plants. A couple topics that were discussed. One was the issue with the ARB and how it's still not a requirement to have 80% native understory plants. That's something that the Conservancy and the town have kind of pushed for a number of years, and it just hasn't happened. Don't know if likely that discussion may come up, but there's some other things going on with ARB and its future, and the town or KICA becoming involved, and so things could look a little different in a year or two. Another thing that the town is talking about doing, and likely will in the coming year, is putting in a tree protection ordinance. It's something the town has never had. It is certainly within our legal authority to have one. And potentially there was some discussion that tree protection ordinance could also include some requirements for native plantings that would semi-supersede the ARB. So it's possible that a requirement for 80% or even greater native plants could go into that tree protection ordinance. So that's something that will be worked on here over the next few months, and will ultimately, make its way to council at some point this year. So, and that, that may be something that this committee gets, is designated to work on at some point this year. I think there is a draft tree protection ordinance that's been pulled from another municipality that we're kind of using as a starting point, and it's being handled now by our planning department and some council members, but a number of these things that came out of the retreat could end up getting referred back to this committee to work on. Kind of like we did in the past with the beach lighting ordinance and the plastics ordinance. This committee kind of drove the research and the verbiage of those ordinances.
Can I ask you a little bit about that?
Sure.
So when you talk about a tree protection ordinance, are there specific tree species that you're looking at in order to protect on every property, or is it amount of trees that currently exist there to protect, or?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't actually seen the draft ordinance, but normally these tree protection ordinances are designed similar to regulations the ARB already has in place, right? You can't cut down a big tree of any sort. If you do, you have to mitigate. So the idea is to protect mainly mature trees. But again, I don't know exactly what this ordinance would say, but that's typically the intent is to keep basically to require that if you're going to remove a tree, you have to get some sort of approval and potentially mitigate if the tree has to come down, similar to what the ARB already does. But it would bring that authority to the town as opposed to the ARB.
Do you think that there could be any teeth behind or interest in some sort of ordinance for rain gardens on the island?
There was some discussion of that at the retreat. I think that, and I'll touch on this when we get to the marsh management plan, but I'm sure you know that the town is in the process of redoing its comprehensive plan. There'll be a lot of discussions that take place during that process. And certainly rain gardens will be one of those. And so how it typically would work is through that comprehensive plan process. Ultimately the comp plan might say, okay, there's a need for an ordinance for rain gardens or something to do with rain gardens. And so the planning commission typically wouldn't write that ordinance. The comprehensive plan would just say that ordinance is needed, and then it would be designated to someone else to write it and get it to council, which again could be this committee. So encourage everyone to be very involved in the comp plan update process. It's kind of the guiding document for the town in all aspects, not just the environment, but it's a great avenue to bring up ideas and see what makes its way into that plan. Anything else on that?
One just thought about the mitigation if there was some type of tree protection ordinance. In regards to like what would be the remedies towards it, I think it'd be good to consider maybe even replacing trees based on the diameter breast height, but also consider doing understory shrubs. I know that was discussed in some other conversations on the island, but that might be something to include if that's
Sure.
in that drafting process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that even if we're not formally asked to write this ordinance or review this ordinance, certainly when there's a draft, I can share it with the committee. And of course, before it would get approved, it would have to go to council for 2 readings, and so there'd be an opportunity there to make comments and suggestions. But try to get it out. I'll certainly get it out to the committee once it moves along. All right, rodenticides and wildlife. Really don't have anything here. I think we sent in 25 to 30 samples last week, so we've got a lot of anticoagulant liver data that we'll have here in the next couple of weeks. So certainly going to share that at the next meeting.
Are those samples from a number of different species or just?
Yeah, they were from raccoons, possums. We had a hawk or 2 in there, I think. A couple alligators.
Yeah, I'm not sure I don't know if the hawks got sent out.
Maybe they did.
I think we kept those out.
We've got a couple of hawks that we need to send. So it was mainly raccoons, possums, and then a couple of alligators. And the alligators not only get tested for anticoagulants, but they also get tested for heavy metals. Because we tend to see extremely high levels of heavy metals in our alligator livers, especially lead. I think we may be close to holding the record for the highest lead concentration in an alligator liver ever. Not that that's a great claim to fame, but so that's something we added here in the last year just to continue to look at those levels. All right, deer management. Just a couple of quick things here. So we did our second set of deer surveys in January. So our overall density for 2022 was 80 deer per square mile. If you compare that to the prior 5 years, so 2022 it was 80. Last year it was 127. Year before that 123, 111, 96, 71. So this is the lowest density we've seen in 5 years. Obviously, a big part of that is the deer calling work that we've conducted, but certainly the recovery of bobcats and their ability to once again eat deer fawns is certainly helping with that. So we're pretty close to where we want to be in terms of a deer density. The goal we set, back when numbers went way up, was 60 to 80 deer per square mile. Ideally, we'd be closer to 60 to 70. So we're at 80 right now. So the plan is to remove 80 deer this year, and then obviously we'll continue our surveys next year and see what that does to densities. Hopefully that'll get us where we want to be, and hopefully bobcats we'll be able to keep them there, and we won't have to do this work anymore. But certainly at least one more year of deer work.
This is just a personal interest question. How do you identify which deer you're taking? Are you taking more bucks than does, or?
Yeah, so with these programs, you're targeting adult females,
Okay.
Or females in general, just because obviously they're the drivers of the population increasing. But certainly some bucks are taken as well, but it's certainly a focus on females. That's all I have on deer. Conservancy projects, current year.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 2 projects right now, the rain garden installations and maritime forest study. For the rain garden installations, since our last meeting, we were able to get with Weston Sampson, who's our contractor, as well as Kim Morganello, to discuss project sites. And we looked at 6 different project sites, and we met with individuals on the committee to look at them. And after some discussion, some SWOT analysis, we determined the site next to the visitors parking lot at the town right here is one of the sites, and the other site would be at Reds Bluff Boat Landing, sort of right next to the gate. And the reasons for picking these sites are not only because of the visibility of these areas, but there would be areas that we could easily access to kind of talk about rain gardens and conduct tours on. But also so that we also have a place where there's some function for the rain gardens that's needed. That was specifically the reason why we chose the Reds Bluff Boat Landing site, since it will already be kind of incorporated within a future project to assist in the drainage of that area. And I know that there's been some discussions about how the project funding would go behind the gate, and I think the idea is that everything would be covered from materials and sort of getting things out there, but not necessarily putting things in the ground. So we're keeping that in mind and working with our contractors to get permitting and everything set up. I believe that we've received as-built from the town, and we're working on incorporating designs and getting their appropriate permits for that. And I think once we get that settled in, we have a firm date, I'll let the committee know. And I think our idea is to use the town hall site as a place for volunteer work. So we would kind of do some of the heavy lifting work beforehand to establish a site, but have a workshop and kind of a volunteer event for people to go in and actually put in the plants and learn more from Kim Morganello at Clemson Extension. So that's our current plans for the site, and based on what Weston Sampson has mentioned to us, is they would have everything figured out and some projects on the ground by mid-April. So I'm keeping in close contact with them, making sure they got all of the data and everything they need for that. So
There was some discussion at the retreat about the rain garden, and there was a little bit of questioning of why it should go here when there's not much visitor traffic. All that to say, I don't know that there will have to be, but it may have to be discussed again at council before anything goes in. But I know you've been talking with Brian about it, and so I'm sure he and I will both keep you updated on that. But I think that, I still think it will happen. It just might be there needs to be some further justification to the value of it, and that people will come here. And obviously, if you tie it into the Grow Native Trail, and that goes in, then you've got another attraction here that will bring people. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of the main reasons is to promote the use of native plants generally. I think
Sure.
that most of the designs will incorporate that, and I think trying to incorporate some other things such as trying to promote ideas that help with FEMA CRS credits, trying to promote water quality, filtration on the island, and I'm more than happy to discuss in front of council. And do you think that will probably end up being at the next council meeting, or?
I don't know. The next meeting is March 8th, I think. But potentially. I'll talk to Brian and Stephanie and see. It may not need to go, but I'll verify that.
Okay, I'll get my ducks in a row in the meantime.
Worst case, if it would have to go and it couldn't be this month, next month, it would be April. So I'll let you.
And to kind of highlight some of this, we worked on a NIFWIC project for about 2 or 3 years, and we highlighted different nature-based solutions that would work on the island. And we interacted with all the individuals on the island, stakeholders, to identify these sites, and rain gardens are one of them. But if anybody wants a copy of our nature-based solutions manual, we have printed copies at the office, so I'm more than happy to hand deliver them to you.
Sure, I'll take one.
I can give you this one.
For my library,
Yeah.
my office library.
So far, we've had some good feedback from the community about it, so really happy with that being finished up.
Before you go on, you want to tell them where you presented this material? I think that's important for them to know.
Yeah.
Different conferences and.
Yeah. So I've introduced this as about 4 different conferences. I presented it at the Social Code Forum last year, which is a NOAA social science conference, at the South Carolina Beach Advocates meeting last February. Also at the Ace Basin Symposium, which also talked about some of the methods that we're using to analyze where we could potentially put these spots. And I'm drawing a blank on the last one.
Forestry, right?
Oh, it'll come to me. But I have had conversations with folks at the USDA Forestry Service who are looking to implement projects in the Intercoastal Waterway. So they reached out to me about that, and we're also working on several projects with DNR to look at, potentially updating the LID manual that they produced and kind of incorporating some ideas that we had from here and some other DNR projects. So there's a lot of conversations going around about this. So, it's kind of good to see this kind of getting spread out. We're also planning to present this at the Land Trust Alliance rally this September. I submitted a proposal for that, so potentially couldn't speak at that, but I'll keep you posted. But
That would be a huge audience there.
oh yeah, absolutely. That's usually like land trusts from around the nation that look at that. So it'll definitely put you on the map for nature-based solutions and low impact development. So
Did a great job on that.
thanks, Jim. And then moving over to the Maritime Forest Study, we had a graduate student, Madison Kluge, who was helping us out on the project, sort of getting some of the LiDAR data figured out and developing some maps. Unfortunately, she decided to leave the program, so we no longer have a graduate assistant, but we're continuing to work on the project to sort of get some of the products in, and right now we have a saltwater intrusion vulnerability analysis being conducted, and we have some preliminary maps for that we're going to share with South Carolina Sea Grant and the college to review. We're also in the process of analyzing LiDAR data to understand the maritime forest density and create maps for land cover. So we're continuing to work on that, and we're in the process of getting a graduate student working on that project again. So
Got it. All right.
that's it.
Okay. Questions on that? All right. We'll move on to the Clemson PhD study. Not a whole lot going on other than catching bobcats at Kiowa, so I'll talk about that here. We opened traps on January 30th. We ran them for 2 weeks. We caught 5 bobcats. I will list them out for you in case you're interested. So on January 31st, we caught our first 2 cats. One was a new adult female, so one we had not captured before at Parkside. The second one that day was a recaptured female, adult female from Ocean Park. She was Bobcat 900 last year. She's now Bobcat 175. On February 5th, we caught a new, likely subadult male in the preserve. On February 6th, we caught 2 cats as well, so cats 4 and 5. One was an adult female that we caught at Captain Sam's Spit. Always like when we catch cats like this. So this cat was originally tagged as a kitten in May of 2021 on Flyway Drive. And she was collared last year as 850, also in the Flyway area. And this year, as an adult, she's hanging out mainly on the western end of the island, at least so far. And then the 5th cat total, and the second one on February 6th was a new adult female at Flyway. So we currently have 4 adult females and a juvenile subadult male. We need 1 more cat at least. We've got 1 more collar. We opened traps up again this week. We've not caught any bobcats this week. If we don't catch them this week, another one this week, we'll shut down, and then we'll open back up probably the first week of March to try to get our last cat. So that is where we are with that.
Will your traps move?
Do we move the traps around?
Yeah, it's like if you're at a stall.
Occasionally, we always stall out after the first week, and yeah, sometimes we'll do little moves with the traps. We don't have that many areas we can trap, but yeah, sometimes just a subtle change in the trap, or there's a lot of times there's almost no rhyme or reason to it, right? Like you get a cold night or windy night or a rainy night, and all of a sudden you catch 2 bobcats the next day, and you haven't caught one in 2 weeks. It just hopefully that'll happen.
Are there traps on Little Bear?
There's 1 on Little Bear, and 1 on near the golf course, pretty close to Little Bear.
Is it uncommon to not have 1 trap there? I mean, I just would think that would be a high.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of success there. We certainly catch cats there. But yeah, it's a great spot to trap because obviously it's a bottleneck right there at the golf course for those cats coming on and off Little Bear. So they walk by our trap every other night. They just haven't caught any yet.
Yeah, I mean, we catch them on the trail cameras just
Oh yeah.
so often.
Oh yeah, they're out there. You just gotta get the right conditions, or they gotta be hungry enough to go in that trap. So we will keep at it. Any questions on that?
I just think that information on where you're catching them is really helpful for us, especially as we look at lands to protect. If there's properties that are undeveloped and we could protect along those areas that you're having a lot of success catching them, I think those are areas to prioritize.
Yep. All right. Marsh management plan. I'll give a quick update on that. So I sent the draft out to the committee last year, I guess. Got a few comments from Mr. Chitwood. But this formally, it went to town council in January, I think, but it was formally adopted on February 7th. So that plan is now officially been officially adopted by the town. So the next step is to put it into practice. So I know, Lee, you were on this email. I'm not sure who else was, but we're basically going into the phase of, like I said, putting it into practice, and it'll start with a number of workshops with entities, community members, regimes, et cetera, as we kind of build momentum and a strategy for moving this plan forward. So I think the work group, the initial meeting of the work group is on March 3rd from 1 to 3 here at Town Hall. And Lee, I know you were invited to that one. But there are a number of other ones that will be taking place with property owners again and regimes. This is mainly targeting the entities early on. So, any questions on that? All right, we're done with old business. Now we go to new business. Got 3 things. The first, and this may be a little premature, we may not be there yet, but is to begin the discussion of potential projects, potential conservancy projects for town funding in the next fiscal year. So that would be July 1, 2023 to June 30, 2020. And so normally those ideas come to this committee. And last year I think there were 4 or 5 ideas presented, and then the committee kind of narrowed it down to the 2 best, and that's what we ended up with. I think the hope here, or the idea of including it now, is to let the committee have a little bit of some preemptive comments or suggestions before the conservancy goes too far down the road in one direction or another. So I will open that up to anyone who has ideas around, where do we go next? What are the hot topics? What do we need more information on? What would we like the conservancy to focus on in the next budget cycle? Who's going first?
Well, I guess, you mind if I spark some ideas?
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
all right, okay. So, I think with the marsh management plan, sort of on the horizon and kind of putting that into practice, I think that's something that I want to look further into. I think salt marshes are critically important, and I think making sure we have, frequent updates to basically the status of our marshes and being able to quickly monitor and assess them is important. And there's some ideas that DNR is being putting out, such as using UAVs to quickly assess marshes and come up with vulnerability analysis over time, over different seasons. So something about getting aerial imagery through the conservancy might be an option. And also kind of looking at different types of vulnerability analysis other than the UEVR that was proposed a few years ago. So trying to do more geospatial analysis is definitely there. Maybe even doing some on-the-ground projects, trying to look at sediment in particular in the marsh, looking at vegetative status in the marsh using vegetative transects, things of that nature. So definitely some research and monitoring projects on the horizon, but also working on potentially doing some restoration projects might be an idea. But that's just for marshes, and that's one of the few things that I've had on the top of my mind for the past few weeks. So.
Yeah, that's certainly a hot topic right now, and that again is something that was discussed at the retreat. Restoration projects in particular were discussed, and I know that. So I guess I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting, but our new council liaison to this committee is Dr. Heidensfelder, and he unfortunately has business engagement in New York this week, so he's not able to be here in person. But I know that he would like to sit down and brainstorm ideas. He's got a number of ideas, and so I think we will set up a meeting to discuss, potential future projects so he can participate here in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I mean, certainly, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of focus on the marsh right now, and it's logical that future research or actual projects, might focus in that area. Any other ideas?
Yeah, I mean, beyond marsh, enhancing the lands that we have protected for the use of wildlife. What's the best use, or what can we implement best management practices in those properties to ensure the future health of our wildlife, and but just beyond marshes, but maritime forests as well.
One of the things that's been floated potentially as an option is that we would engage with DNR on a project. So we would work in tandem with DNR on potentially getting a living shorelines project in, or potentially doing more research on vulnerability analyses in the marshes. There's been a lot of discussions about LID practices and understanding how do you conduct the best vulnerability analysis for the southeastern marshes, which they're working on 2 Catalyst grants right now for. So that could be an option where we could either get on their projects or supplement their projects with ours. Just an idea, but I think one of the things that would likely leave a huge impact on South Carolina as a state is if we initiated a wetland restoration project using living shorelines, because I don't think there's been a large landscape-wide project yet, from what I've heard.
Okay, another idea I just remembered that came up at the retreat was something on the topic of fertilizer use, ponds, golf courses, concerns there, potential for some project looking at that.
We talked about that at the marsh, at the last meeting.
Yeah, and I think that might be worth looking into to see what type of downstream impacts we have in water quality. I think that'd be something I'd be interested in looking at as well.
I think that's all the ones that I recall from the retreat being brought up. But I think that there was some discussion around research projects are great, right? They give you data to make decisions, but it's also valuable to have a project, right? That actually does something. And so, if that's a restoration project, or that obviously is a visible project, that probably is worth giving that a little bit extra thought, maybe.
I think that my focus has shifted towards that, instead of engaging outside groups to conduct analysis, we would do in-house stuff. So mainly just purchasing equipment so we can conduct different things out in the field. That way we have the capacity as an organization to actually conduct them. And then maybe focusing and shifting our efforts towards putting out land management projects instead of just additional research. Because, certainly we can get the data now, but it's just about, our data analysis will help identify sites, but we would like to just go forth and start putting in projects, because I think the restoration enhancement of habitats is kind of our focus now.
One area that's currently kind of a hot topic within the town is our kayak launch up there by the bridge, the public access there to the river. Obviously it's not the perfect spot for that, but that's what, it's a Greenbelt project. It's designed for public access. Because the public has been accessing it a lot, there's some issues with, the marsh, the quality of the marsh there. It's a big mud flat. A lot of that was probably driven by the fact that area was used by commercial kayak companies on pretty much a daily basis until the town prohibited that activity there. So I know there's a lot of interest within the town at restoring that area. So I know that that may not be something that the Conservancy gets involved in. But, projects like that, that restore marshes or improve public access or, mitigate issues that we are causing.
I think that is a worthwhile thing to look into, and that could be easily done. I think process. I'm thinking just to kind of come up with a kind of a draft plan, but it'd be to start harvesting some of the Spartina seeds in the marsh and then grow them at a local nursery, potentially Charleston Aquatics, and then just replant them. And potentially this could be part of DNR Seeds to Shorelines project. And we could get volunteers to help us out with that. So that'd be fun to do.
Sounds good. Anybody else? Any other project ideas?
Yeah, Jim, if I could add.
Sure.
I wanted to go off of what Collie said because he actually hit the idea that I was thinking about is the lands that are under the conservation easements that the Conservancy has currently on the island. Sometimes they might be multiple acres, and other times it's like, one lot, but, down a street that could be only a quarter of an acre. But just this week, I got an update that we have 199 homes under construction currently on the island. And what it all boils down to is that the few lands that we do have left and parcels on the island that are able to be natural are becoming increasingly more important because each home that is, of course, lot that's developed, that's less habitat, and you're sticking a house there. And I think a great idea is what Collie said. I just wanted to kind of reiterate that go to those Conservancy properties and look at them and don't just say, oh, this is great. Like we got some trees here. But if we really took a hard look and said, is this good habitat? Do we have, like an understory, mid-story? Do we need to take a few trees out to promote some more sunlight getting to the ground? You can't utilize every form of kind of forest management, if you will. Like we can't rip a prescribed fire on the island for the most part. But I think it would be very cool to look at those properties and where we can make that the best habitat possible. Because again, there's less and less, forested land and more homes on the island. And so the places where we do have forested property is just increasingly important.
Good points, Matt. I think that's been under our minds recently is about, we have a well-developed canopy, but what is the understory and mid-story looking like? And how can we not only on our properties improve that, but also help residential properties, people who own properties to sort of adopt some of the management actions as well. And I think there are a few properties I'd like to consider doing some additional work on. And I think having some outside input on these about what might be the best options would be helpful for us. Because I think that might help us with developing management plans for the rest of our properties on the island.
Yep, I think that's a good idea. That's something we've talked about for years and years, which is that, a limiting habitat type out here on Kiowa is early successional habitat. So things that normally come in after trees are removed or cut down, because we for so long have put such a focus on preserving the tree canopy. And obviously when you have a solid canopy, very little grows underneath it. I can think of a few Conservancy lots that are, a lot of small pine trees, that are densely packed together, and there's really nothing but pine straw underneath them, right? So potential to open up an area in the middle, let sunlight hit. You may not require any plantings or anything, just simply letting the natural kind of forestation project, process start taking place, right? Which, it starts with grasses and forbs and things that birds and small mammals and other things and bobcats like.
Can I ask if the ARB would have a problem with that?
Probably, but probably a way to work around that.
Okay,
I would think.
that would be.
What would? Yeah, this is Tommy with the ARB. I believe well, I just wanted to get clear on what the question was. Would the ARB have a problem with what specifically?
With taking down a substantial number of trees on an undeveloped lot to promote understory wildlife habitat. So more of a forestry management process.
Right. I don't, on the surface of the suggestion, no, I don't think we would. I think we would look at that as a case-by-case basis. There are, speaking about understory, there are cases, and there's been one recently where we required some mitigation from an applicant who was taking out a tree, and that mitigation was for understory itself. So we don't look at it as necessarily a one-to-one replacement when we're looking at mitigation or trees coming out. We kind of look at holistically at the site in terms of what may be needed. There may be a better solution there, and in that case, it was understory. So I think that's something, we would absolutely be open to discussing and collaborating on.
The approach that I think would be a good one to take is, documenting, recording what kind of wildlife is using that specific area at the time, doing a sample of if you were to trim the canopy to a certain degree, allow that light to come in and monitor what new growth you see over time and what new wildlife that does bring in.
Yeah, certainly makes sense. I mean, certainly if you have a pine forest, right, with pretty much one or two species, right, and you cut them down, maybe it's just in the interior part, so it's not super noticeable from the road, right, but you're going to have 20, 30 different plant species in there within a year or two, and certainly a lot of different animals utilizing that habitat as well. But documenting it, sure, seems like a good idea.
Yeah, that would be a wonderful project. But definitely, I think, and it kind of plays into, thinking from our organizational standpoint for accreditation, when we go up for accreditation in 5 years, we're going to have land management plans, and this is kind of a good start to that. It's kind of coming up with something that we can use as a best management practice going forward. So I think as long as my board's fine with it, I think we can look into that.
Sounds good. Anybody have any other project ideas, areas, topics? All right, well, we've got a number of them. Certainly this discussion will continue. Obviously the town is currently in our budget process, so that budget will get approved, and certainly by the June council meeting, but the discussion will start in March. It doesn't mean that we have to have projects already fleshed out entirely before the budget process, ends. We just need and my guess is that the dollar amount that was in there this year will probably stay in there. Unless there's a particular project that would cost substantially more than that or less than that. But I don't know. Obviously that's a town process, and so at the council level, and so certainly encourage everyone to be a part of that process. All right, moving on to the second item, 2023 Conservancy Land Acquisition discussion. So I put this on here mainly because there is a current potential project that the Conservancy has approached the town about. There's also been some initial discussion on creating a pool of money within the town to support future land acquisition, mainly off island, but in the near, in close proximity to the town. So, Kali, I don't think you need to go into a wealth of detail, but maybe just real quick. You've applied for Greenbelt funds for this amount. This is the project site. What you hope to do there, and then what you're asking the town for.
Sure. Well, I'll back up just for a second. I mean, one of the main goals of the Conservancy is to preserve land. We have several methods of doing so, primarily through conservation easements and land donations. And another one is acquiring land through purchasing property. As land comes fewer and fewer around, that is one of the main options we have to pursue is purchasing land. We look on island and off island, and so this year, when it comes to acquiring land through a purchase, it takes a lot of money, and so thankfully there are funding sources out there available, such as the Greenbelt program, that has a set amount of money each year for organizations like ours to be able to apply for, as long as it's a nonprofit, to apply for these monies to purchase land. And so we have one Greenbelt application in this year, and that is for a roughly 6-acre property just off Betsy Carson Parkway, very close to the town. It's adjacent to a pending conservation easement. It's a high priority site for us in the efforts to add to contiguous preservation, protect historical and cultural significance of that property and Johns Island, Betsy Carson as a whole, along with protecting natural infrastructure that's on the property and protecting the view shed coming onto Kiowa Island. This property kind of hit all of those spots there, so it was a great one for us to pursue. We have, as a bonus, we've incorporated a public nature trail on the property that would come off of the existing sidewalk that would lead through the property, educating its visitors on the native vegetation, ultimately leading to a marsh viewing bench and or outdoor classroom setting. And so we approached the town about seeing if they'd be interested in helping funding this project and also future projects down the road that we see are importance for preservation. That
was perfect.
Good.
Anybody have any questions? Comments, thoughts? No? Wow.
It's all Conservancy folks here, and maybe a few people on.
Well, we got a few up online. All right. So I guess just to kind of take that a little further, so town council will likely, or Ways and Means, which is town council, will likely be discussing this at their next meeting, the potential for the town to contribute $75,000 to the purchase of this property. And then there will also be, during the budget process, a discussion around money set aside for future purchases of this type or similar. Right now, the requested amount for that was $500,000. So I believe the idea was that if the 75 was given, then the 500 request for next year would become 425. But certainly that would go through the town's normal budgeting process over the next couple of months. All right, we'll move on then. Kiowa Go Green 2.0. Guess this is mine. So I'm sure we all remember that our former liaison headed up a Kiowa Go Green committee working group looking at a number of green ideas and strategies. It kind of fell apart at the end and really didn't go all the way through the end of the process. So we're in the process of kicking that off again. Second time, so we're calling it 2.0. And so this effort will be very similar to the prior effort, but this will be run at least for right now, it will be run through the town's Public Works Department. So not through this committee, though there should be reports and updates coming to this committee. There may be a time for this committee to be involved. It may get designated some aspect of this. But I just thought I would highlight the initiatives in this project that were presented at our retreat earlier in the month. So those are to increase the number of EVs, electric vehicles in the town's fleet, hopefully to 5 or 6. We currently have 1, a Ford Lightning that we recently purchased. Second initiative is to install public EV charging stations across the island. We're looking at potentially 6 different sites across the island, and so investigating that. Third initiative was to continue to decrease the use of plastics across the island. This one could end up being kicked back to us. Implement hazardous waste collection for the community. Continue to explore solar panel options. And then this was another big focus of the initial Kiowa Go Green, but explore the use of battery-powered landscape equipment across the island. So that's really all I have on that, other than to say, you know, that initiative is going again. It's going to be headed up by the Public Works Department as well as a council member, and so there'll be more info on that coming. Questions on that? All right, now we can move to the quick part here. So reports. We'll start with me. Aaron had a few things, but he'll be back, I'm sure. So I will not provide any report at this point. Hey, you're just in time. Your report. If you have anything you would like to report.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about something. So just a few things. Not sure where the last meeting left off, but I'll just kind of briefly touch on the fall migration kind of summary. We ended up banding 8,660 some new birds this fall. We had another 2,200 recaps, and that was over 99 different species of birds. It was a record year at the Captain Sam's end of the island. We caught more birds than we ever had in one season. And Little Bear was pretty close to about average. And we had, you know, like I said, it was a good season, lots of birds. Had a couple interesting recaptures I can touch on. We had a tree swallow that we caught that was originally banded up in, I think it's Lido Beach, New York. That bird was banded back in 2015 as a chick in its nest box, because they breed in like bluebird boxes up there. So that bird was banded as a little nestling, and it is pretty old at this point, and we ended up catching it down on the west end of the island. We also caught a yellow rump warbler that was banded up in Ontario, Canada at Long Point Bird Observatory. And we had another bird that was an American redstart that was banded at the Pelee Island Bird Observatory in Ontario, Canada as well. And then we caught a gray catbird that was banded on Sullivan's Island last year. There's a small banding operation that goes on Sullivan's Island, and we ended up catching one of their birds this year. And then another bird that wasn't part of the fall migration stuff was a Cooper's hawk that naturalists got called about, and they went and picked it up, and it had a band on its leg. And I found out yesterday that bird was banded back in 2010, right? Yeah, 2010 on Johns Island. Kind of just north of River Road, what looked like to be in somebody's backyard, by Dr. Maria Whitehead. I don't have any other information of why or how they banded that bird there. It doesn't appear to be a part of anything. So I don't know if it was like a rehab bird or maybe that got a band on it and then they let it go there or something. But that's a pretty old bird, and they were able to age it back then. So we know that bird was hatched in 2009. So pretty old bird. And then right now I'm just working on the marsh sparrows banding. Did a little bit of that in January, but most of my days got either rained or winded out, so I lost some time there. And then also banding just the winter songbirds down on the west end as well. So.
Any update on Will Oakley? I know he was working on his PhD over at
Crickets. It's been months since I've heard from him.
Yeah. Is he still working on his project? Or?
As far as I know. I gave him all of my marsh sparrow data, so I'm hoping something comes out of it.
Well, I want to say that was a fantastic article in the Post and Courier, and I've had a number of people contact me about it. And
good.
So
thank you.
Good job.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, front page, pretty big.
Yeah, I didn't even know that. I knew they were going to do an article. I didn't even know she didn't even tell me that was going to be coming out or anything. I didn't know until somebody said, "Hey, you're in the paper."
Front page of the second section, big picture of you.
Yeah.
That's great.
All right, moving on to Community Association. Matt, are you still with us?
Oh yeah, I'm here.
Good.
All right, let's see. Looking back over the notes, or the notes from September, we did get the fish tissue samples back from the lab, and kind of like always, everything looked good. When we're doing that, we're looking at heavy metals and pesticides, and all the fish checked out, and we're fine. So that's good. And I guess for me, with the ponds management side of things, gonna crank up my kind of large scale pond pruning operation here, I think at the end of this month, where I have a contractor take out those large wax myrtles, and it's helping with erosion. And I know I've brought this project up. It's been multi-years. So we're just starting that back up for 2023 here in a couple weeks. And I'm also trying out some new technologies in the ponds just to hopefully just improve overall water quality. One is essentially it binds up phosphorus in the water. Phosphorus is kind of the limiting nutrient, the driver for algal blooms, and especially harmful algal bloom species of algae. And instead of using a herbicide to spray algae, my thought is if we can fight the source of it, which is the kind of excess nutrients in the water, then we don't need to use actual herbicides. We can treat it with a very safe product that just permanently binds up the phosphorus and makes it unavailable to be absorbed and used by algae to grow. So there's that. And then with that, some of y'all may remember, it came up a couple years ago, the use of a fairly new technology in kind of water management. It's the use of nano bubbles, which are nano sized, so extremely small bubbles. And they are so small that they're actually neutrally buoyant, so they do not rise to the surface. Originally, I'd actually talked with Jack about it because the way they did it was they used ozone, and those were the bubbles, was actually ozone. And Jack informed me with his chemistry expertise that seemed like a pretty violent process, creating a kind of hydroxyl radical and sort of crazy stuff. And at the time, that was early on in this technology, and they were using it for more or less kind of sterilization of water. So it was killing not only algae, but bacterias. Well, they've kind of done more work with it and realized that you can use the same generator, the same pumps, but you just use ambient air. So the air we're breathing, and create these nano bubbles and put them in the water. And it's not as violent of a situation, but what it does do is it really gets oxygen through the entire water column, which drives healthy processes, for lack, kind of shortening it up. But healthy processes in the water helps get good bacteria in the water that help break down detritus and ultimately increasing not only available oxygen, but just overall pond health and water quality. So we're doing some trials with that stuff to see if it's something we would want to use more widely on the island. And it's really all I've got.
Wow. Hey, Matt, I'd forgotten all about that. So this is Jack.
Yeah.
I'll think about that again. That's pretty interesting stuff. I'm just finishing my environmental chemistry chapter for my new book, so I'll have to look at it again.
Okay, great.
All right,
That's pretty weird stuff.
It is when they were. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, back when we originally talked about it and they were using ozone, I remember your eyes got very wide, Jack, when I told you what I had been told, and then you explained to me your feelings on it, and I had just kind of sort of nixed that idea since then, but the technology has kind of developed and changed as time has gone on, and so it seems to be a little bit different and kind of safer of an option right now.
Yeah, I'm happy to look into it a bit more. So it sounds pretty interesting.
Sure.
Thanks.
All right, golf resort.
Yeah, so the only thing that Liz wanted me to relay to y'all is that our trailers are going to be delivered on Saturday morning. So we are officially moving into those and moving out of the
Exciting. Maybe not exciting to move into the trailers, but exciting to get a new nature center, finally. Very good. Tommy, anything from the ARB?
Nothing to report, but we did get a sneak peek of things happening over there and at the Nature Center, and it looks promising. We're excited about it. So
That's great. Yep, I'm excited about it too. Conservancy, anything else?
Just recap, we finally finished an nature-based solutions manual, so if I want something, I can give them to you. We're also working on the ecological health report, which is looking at 5 distinct habitats in Kiowa. We conducted some vegetation analysis, looking at marshes and how they've been changing and other habitats, and that should be coming out in the next few months. So.
Sounds good. Turtle Patrol, no Lynn, but I know she's excited for the upcoming season. She'll be here before we know it. Citizens' comments. We had one citizen for a little while. Mr. Capelli left before citizens' comments. Chairman's comments, I have none. Committee member comments.
Good reports.
Motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
See you in 2 months.
Andy Capelli, he's on the planning commission.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Alright.
I'm finally happy we're going to do something in the marsh.
Yeah, let's do
I'm excited. I'm going after the meeting.
Down.
I didn't want to go, yes.
Yeah, I need to get in contact with Stu
Yeah.
at some point. And then we gotta go out and walk.
I had someone ask me, we don't have any spoonbills that are nesting on the island.
Yeah, thank you.
They are done for